After being cheated on 12 times in 6 years, I learned the hard way that love can coexist with betrayal. Steve, he's dying, it's not a big deal, they said when my first girlfriend cheated. Relationships are messy and life is more complex than we admit. First, I want to mention that this is a lengthy post. It recounts at least 12 occasions on which I was betrayed over 6 years and 3 different relationships, along with the lessons I derived from those experiences. I believe it can be entertaining to read, and I hope it may even assist some of you in your own situations. If you prefer not to read it, I have shared a video that covers everything where I think it sounds better coming from me directly. The link is provided below. https Uru bzkdby8rog8 sysrbifwwrbtpdl35. If you're reading this, you have likely either been cheated on someone, or you simply wish to hear a stranger speak about a time they were cheated on. It could be all three. Fortunately for you, I am going to share several different instances when I was betrayed and what I learned from them. Looking back, it occurred more times than I care to acknowledge. It is quite embarrassing and I am uncertain what it reflects about me. However, I will also share moments when I was unfaithful. I am not perfect and I accept that. Being young can be challenging, being in love is tough, and being in a relationship is probably the hardest of all. So let us get started, shall we? The first time I was cheated on was likely the most painful, partly because it was my initial experience but primarily due to the circumstances surrounding it. I was 18 at the time and completely infatuated with my girlfriend. Let's refer to her as Allie. She was a hot-headed little firecracker with a troubled past and a broken home much like my own. She was wild and energetic and I found it exhilarating. She did not tolerate nonsense from anyone. I actually witnessed her confront another girl because she spilled her drink. How could someone as wonderful as her betray me? At that time, I believed girls like her were thrilling, and being troubled like me made it seem logical for us to be together. Thus, I fell deeply in love. Fast forward about a year and she was going to a family friend's house for Christmas Eve. I did not attend, it was not my place to do so. However, as the hours passed, she did not return home. She was texting me that everything was fine and that she would be back in the morning. Whatever, it was a family friends gathering, I let it go. When she finally came home the next day, she appeared different. After a few days, I could not shake the feeling that something was wrong. One night, while she was asleep, I made the unfortunate decision to go through her phone. I advise against doing this. It often leads to pain and sorrow for which you may not be prepared. I discovered messages between her and one of the family friends expressing their love for each other and revealing they had been intimate on Christmas Eve. That was just wrong. However, here is the reality. The man she cheated with was dealing with a lot. He was our age, but he was ill, suffering from aggressive cancer that was not improving. It was severe enough that years before this he had to have his leg amputated. Yes, it was that serious. I genuinely felt sympathy for him, but was that supposed to excuse their actions? Her family certainly thought so. She informed them that I had found out and they lectured me. They were audacious enough to say that I was wrong for my feelings of distress. Steve, he is dying. It is not a significant issue. Sure, he is dying, but he still has enough strength left to betray me with my girlfriend. But he did not have enough energy for me to confront him physically. I knew that would be a bad choice, so I was left heartbroken. The girl I adored cheated on me with a cancer-stricken man with one leg on Christmas Eve, and I was made to feel like the villain because he was dying. And he did eventually die approximately 2 years later. By that time, Ali and I were merely a chapter in the past, and I truly felt bad for him. He was far too young to pass away in that manner, and I comprehended the situation. If I were in his position, I would have acted the same way every single time I had the opportunity, and it is likely that I would have felt no guilt or concern for the consequences. In all likelihood, there would never be any repercussions either. Who would retaliate against a one-legged, ill man who is on the verge of death? Probably no one. I certainly did not, so I was just left feeling sorrowful. The next woman who betrayed me was named Jen. I dated Jen for 4 years. She cheated on me at least 10 times, possibly more. She was a gamer girl who was really into technology and personal computer gaming. She would encounter all types of eager, lonely gamer guys while playing online. You know how those gamer boys can get when there is a girl in the lobby. Initially, she would flirt with them innocently and I thought nothing of it. Then we began receiving packages delivered to our apartment. Nice items such as laptops and computer monitors. She claimed the guys she played with liked her and that she flirted with them to persuade them to buy her things. I believed this was completely inappropriate, but then she gave me a brand new laptop. Alright, this is quite nice. My girlfriend was clever enough to get these guys to purchase us cool and expensive items. Flirt away, Jen, flirt away. It was as if she was running an OnlyFans operation before it even existed. And because she was merely flirting, it seemed harmless. However, it turned out she was not just flirting. One night, I returned home early from work and heard her through the bedroom door. I listened for a moment, and when things began to feel too real, I opened the door to discover her on webcam with a man while she was pleasuring herself. And this was not the only man she was doing this with. In reality, I was the only one being deceived. Furthermore, when she would visit her parents who lived a few hours away, she would actually meet up with some of these guys and engage in much more than just online flirting. Let's say she was earning those laptops. I found this out because one of those men reached out to me on Facebook to confess his actions. I suppose it was his method of retaliation against her for not selecting him over me. A sort of, if I cannot have you, then no one can mentality. Yet for some reason we stayed together. It was probably because we lived together and it was easier to remain there than to move out and start afresh. Therefore, instead of ending our relationship, I started cheating as well. We attempted to maintain this bizarre relationship devoid of trust and genuine connection, while both of us were unfaithful to one another and then returned home to sleep in the same bed. It is maddening to reflect on this now, and I am shocked we sustained it for so long, but we did. Eventually, her friends began to reach out to me, attacking me for being a terrible person for cheating on her and breaking her heart, insisting that I needed to be a real man. They were entirely unaware of what she had done to me or what she was actually engaging in. She simply told them I was the problem, so I finally ended the relationship with her. Then I moved on to the third girl who would betray me. Let's refer to her as Harley, like Harley Quinn. She was covered in tattoos, emotionally scarred, and a heavy drinker just like me. We were a perfect match, right? What could be more ideal than two troubled drinkers with trust issues enjoying nighttime escapades together? Now she was the last woman I cheated with on Jen before I finally left her for good. Therefore, she did not trust me from the beginning. She was perpetually insecure, convinced that I would betray her no matter how often I reassured her that the Jen situation was uniquely messed up and not indicative of my usual behavior in a relationship. However, her insecurity and lack of trust in me persisted. I understood the basis for her feelings, but it was frustrating. I wanted to have a genuine and honest relationship with her, and I believed we were doing well. Time passed and Thanksgiving approached. She went to her mother's house while I went to work. We typically texted often, but she failed to communicate with me that day even after I returned from work. It reminded me of the Christmas I spent with Allie, just that overwhelming feeling a holiday spent alone again. Why was she not responding? Everything within me screamed that she was cheating on me. It had to be happening once more. No, just let it go. It is nothing. She is not Allie, so I tried to dismiss it. The next day, she arrived and told me that her phone had died and that Thanksgiving with her family had been delightful. Then she proceeded to take a shower. I noticed she left her phone on the bed, and this was my chance, my opportunity to discern the truth. I followed my intuition. Was this history repeating itself? Was she deceiving me? Should I look through her phone? No, do not invade her privacy. Trust her. Just then, her phone vibrated and lit up. I could see the screen clearly, a message from a man stating, "I miss you too, I cannot wait to feel you again." I was correct. All of my instincts were validated. I picked up her phone and began to examine it. I had to after that. Sure enough, there were messages between them about meeting up, followed by messages discussing their feelings afterward. They felt pretty good about it. When I confronted her, she claimed it was my fault because I had cheated on her first, which I had never done. However, her insecurity was unshakable. Her tears and pleas managed to keep us together for a little while longer, but eventually I ended it. I had to. I could not endure another Jen situation all over again, so I moved on. Now let's discuss what I learned from each of these experiences. Getting cheated on is devastating. It is gut-wrenching and heartbreaking every time. However, with time and reflection, I cannot entirely blame any of them for their actions. Allie wanted to experience that physical connection with a friend she loved and was fearful he would die before she had the chance, yet she approached it incorrectly. She could have ended our relationship and had a full relationship with him until his passing. Perhaps she desired both. Maybe that is part of why people cheat, not just to spare their partner's feelings by not breaking up with them, but because they genuinely do not want to lose them. It is entirely possible to love one person while wanting someone else or even loving another person. One may desire to have it all. The notion of selfishness is not far-fetched. They want to indulge in the fantasy without sacrificing their reality for it. Even if their relationship is less thrilling than their fantasies, they can still rely on the security it provides. And perhaps the fantasy may lose its allure if they experienced it every day. But we live only one life. Not pursuing everything you desire in that life could leave you feeling like you missed out on something you will never get to experience again. It is a difficult situation. The most frustrating aspect of cheating is that the repercussions of one's actions typically impact the person betrayed far more than they affect the person who acted unfaithfully. Causing such emotional distress is undeniably wrong each time. But is the desire itself wrong? Is it wrong to want someone else? I do not believe so. It may be selfish, but is it inherently wrong? I do not think so. I view it as entirely reasonable and human to want. I also think it is very challenging to be in a relationship while feeling drawn to another person. You endure these conflicting emotions but cannot act on them because you are committed to someone else. What do? You either sever ties with one of them or you cheat. It is not simple, yet it occurs frequently. I am not the only person who has been cheated on, and I am certainly not the only one who has betrayed a partner. However, I believe it is only right to end the relationship before acting on that impulse. I consider this the fair course of action, even if it does not present the best image. It remains the better choice. As for Jen, she was materialistic in every sense. She sought the finer things in life and never intended to end up with someone like me. I was financially struggling, yet she became infatuated with me. I could not provide her with luxurious items, but she cherished me, my personality, my appearance, my body. However, my genitals were not going to procure her a new computer or take her on exciting trips. Therefore, she found 10 others who could fulfill those desires, but she wanted it all. I cannot hold that against her. However, one cannot have everything. You cannot enjoy the fun and charming yet impoverished individual as well as the wealthy but dull individuals. You must make a choice. You have to determine what you genuinely want from life or from relationships and act based on that understanding. It is acceptable to remain non-committal and embrace what others are willing to offer. That is their responsibility. No one owes you anything, and as a single person, you need not provide anyone with explanations. So, living as a single individual allows you to make the most of your life. And definitely do not settle for someone who does not meet your core expectations for what you want in a partner and in your life. Otherwise, you will always be searching for those qualities elsewhere. Regarding Harley, her insecurity and lack of faith in me was a burden. It consumed her daily, and I accept that it was my fault. I should have ended my relationship with Jen instead of being unfaithful. I could have approached Harley with honesty and truthfulness, completely avoiding the insecurity altogether. I understand why she was apprehensive, and I never should have entered a relationship with her. Much like everything else, cheating leads to more cheating. Naturally, she would suspect I was going to be disloyal. How could she not? The capacity of our thoughts and fears to materialize and morph into reality is profound. Thus, she felt the need to betray me preemptively, or as she later confessed, she believed she needed to retaliate for my previous unfaithfulness, which I did not commit. That was merely a belief she constructed based on her knowledge of my history. Oh well. If she imparted anything to me, it is this: never date someone whom you have cheated with, whether you cheated or they cheated or both. The relationship begins on a foundation of broken trust, which creates a terrible first impression. Insecurity and doubts will inevitably arise. And it is not a question of if but when, so once more, do not cheat, simply leave. Thus there you have it, my 3 worst relationships and the lessons I gleaned from them. And I do not mean to suggest that if I were cheated on today, I would be okay with it. I would not. I would be devastated. However, I feel that through these experiences, I have gained a bit more understanding and empathy regarding the reasons behind a person's betrayal, and I hope you might too. May you never face infidelity. But if it does happen to you, I hope you learn from it. And if you do find yourself betrayed, may you recover with composure and grace. I certainly did not initially, yet it improves. Keep your head held high and keep moving forward. You will be all right. In summary, relationships are challenging and infidelity is painful, but life is complex. We have only one opportunity at it, and at times the experiences we truly desire overshadow the potential risks that accompany them. People can be selfish, which can lead to their partners getting hurt. Additionally, we may have more influence over our partner's betrayal than we realize. Again, life is complex, but the agony of being a victim of infidelity will lessen, and you will emerge from it all right. Story 2. Living with major depressive disorder makes me feel like a villain in my own story. I become abusive when I'm not controlling myself. My wife forgives me despite my chaos, but I feel unworthy. Can I break this cycle before it breaks us both? I am using a throwaway account because this issue is so personal to me that I do not want it linked to my main account. I am not concerned about someone figuring out my identity. I expect someone close to me will say, "Hey, is this you?" and show me the post. It is simply not in my nature to discuss such matters openly. I feel embarrassed. There is nothing remarkable about my situation or my background. Depression is prevalent in my family. I underwent a traumatic loss of a parent when I was 13 years old. I managed to function. I get out of bed every day. I eat daily. I sleep reasonably well most nights. I try to take care of my responsibilities. However, I struggle to stay on top of things, particularly remembering details. And I also find it challenging to focus and provide people with the patience and attention they deserve. Currently, I am experiencing an episode. It can make the things I say confusing to others at times. I have difficulty separating my emotions from expressing my needs, which leads me to spend hours telling my wife how she is not meeting my needs and criticizing her character. This is not accurate. She does so much to support me. She is only human and cannot fix my dysfunction. She hears me, listens to my genuine concerns, and makes adjustments where she is able. There is no doubt about that. When I am spiraling, I lose sight of all of this. I become overwhelmed with emotions and irrational, accusing her of being a poor communicator when in fact I am the one being impossible in that moment. I criticize her harshly. I lie directly to her face and blame her for all sorts of perceived wrongs. Then later I come to my senses and must confront the damage I have inflicted. If she is understanding, which she often is, I feel even worse. I feel abusive. Where I may have previously worried that I did not deserve her, I now act so insecure and destructively that forgiveness feels undeserved. Being understood and accepted in this state of mind is even harder. I do not want it, I want it to disappear. I say I am sorry, she responds, it's okay, and she genuinely means it. However, that is not okay with me. I feel terrible when she forgives me so completely, makes adjustments to our communication, or modifies her reactions toward me because I do not want her to change for my benefit. I truly love her just as she is. I am the one with the problem. I fear repeating this cycle and experiencing another episode, and I am aware that it is inevitable. I have the right medication and it has been beneficial. It seems like it might be time to increase the dosage again. Once I do, I should be fine for some time. The frequency of these episodes diminishes significantly, but they do not cease entirely. I become completely unpredictable as every rational thought I have collapses, and in a state of panic I engage in various behaviors. I might try drinking, staying awake all night, or both. I might look for a new job. I might attempt to write a song or craft a long text like this one. Nothing fully prevents it. Deep down, I know the following is true. My wife loves me, my family loves me, my peers think I am interesting, that is why they talk to me. Younger individuals look up to me, I am a genuine artist with real fans, I am somewhat attractive. I connect with people easily. In my mind, I am constantly battling random thoughts and negative self-talk. If they truly love you, why do you feel so alone? Your interests are trivial, that is why no one shares them. Your opinions are offensive, rude, and unwelcome. Are you just hormonal, you despicable person? You have inflicted so much pain and you are bound to cause more. Why are you hurting those you love? She is sad because of you. She is angry because of you. She is quiet because you are uninteresting. She is contemplating all the ways you have disappointed her. She is not cooling off during this argument. You are simply not worth the trouble. You are getting older, fatter, more addicted, less attractive, and less relevant. You should have mastered this by now. You are a man in your 40s. You have made too many poor choices. It is too late for you. You are broke. You are lazy. This entire situation is going to revolve around you, isn't it? Selfish. You express strange things. You have committed terrible actions. Your ideas are genuinely repulsive. I love film, and throughout my life I never understood David Lynch's movies. The fractured psyches, the Morbius-like plots, the dreamlike discomfort of not being fully grounded in reality, splitting characters as a way to compartmentalize and differentiate between the good and the bad. Suddenly all these films resonate with me and make complete sense. That terrifies me. I do not trust myself. I can be completely convinced I am functioning within a logical framework, and it is only when I calm down that I realize how mistaken I was. I am an unreliable narrator. I genuinely rely on and trust my wife's decision-making process, and when I am healthy, that trust remains intact. When I am unwell, I have no faith in her at all. I become arrogant and reckless. I have never been more aware of how utterly fragile I am, and I despise it. I was perfectly well a week ago and completely overwhelmed a month before that. I was excellent for several months prior and voluntarily admitted myself to the psychiatric ward before that. This pattern has continued for as long as I can remember, except now I realize I did not always have this issue. Once upon a time, I did not struggle with this, my dad did. The day he allowed it to consume him is when it stopped merely hovering over me and began to cling to me. I have never felt the urge to isolate myself as strongly as I do now. I fight against it. I accept invitations from friends on social media and I show up at the gatherings. If I commit to doing something on a particular day at a certain time, I will attend. I must do this to hold myself accountable. I try not to spread my misery, so I express manners and gratitude whenever possible. I strive to enjoy the moment. I attempt to live as fully as I can. At the end of the day, it is just my wife and me. She has never known me better than she does now. She has adapted and learned how to navigate my most fragile moments. She has tolerated my insecurities and my outbursts. I am in therapy and we are returning to couples counseling. She must witness every facet of me, unlike my friends, family, and coworkers, and I am growing weary for her sake. I still feel like I am 13. I feel jealous, insecure, and immature, as if I am still trying to find my way in the world. I am filled with angst, and at times it feels like I am experiencing teenage hormones. I am overly emotional all the time. Sometimes the idea of sex repulses me, and at other times I frighten myself with my hypersexuality. Everything feels so extreme. I cling desperately to good moments and positive feelings because I am aware of the darkness lurking just around the corner. I cannot escape myself, but I feel sorry for my wife. I believe I should be placed in a cage at times, safely kept away from the people I care about most because they have to endure my words and actions. Yes, it is depression, post-traumatic stress disorder, and likely some other issues. But on the surface, I am a perpetrator of verbal and emotional abuse when I do not manage myself. I have dealt with this for so long, simply enduring, and then last summer I broke. I sought help and found the right medication. I love how I feel when they are effective. I have let my guard down at times, which has made the effects hit harder. It begins with an overwhelming sensation, followed by difficulty focusing, irritability, and negative thoughts. I attempt to fend those thoughts off, but then I neglect something I should be attending to, leading to gaps in my memory and making me a poor listener. I then try to manage my feelings, which transforms me into a selfish person because while most people can occasionally focus on someone else, I am just trying to maintain my composure. I am fully aware of this, and it is not fair to impose this burden on others constantly. People advise me to reach out or lean on them, but it feels excessive. I am too much. This is merely the inner dialogue in my mind. I also experience the world, and it is overwhelming. There are not enough sick days in a lifetime for this. Therefore, I have no choice but to persevere and try not to fall apart. I can see that I am happy, I know that much. I count my blessings and appreciate the love in my life. I look at my wife and I see my salvation. I desperately want to protect her from me. I am so cruel. Regardless of how much I learn about myself, how well-adjusted my medication is, or how perfect my support system is, I know in my heart that the last time I felt secure will not be the last time. I wish I were not such a jerk. I am always afraid of what comes next, slowly destroying everything that is precious to me. Story 3. I had a gut feeling that a fellow pilot's engine would fail on his first flight after maintenance. "If you lose power on takeoff, don't try to turn back," I yelled. Minutes later, I heard his frantic mayday call, only to find myself standing on part of his severed arm. It still haunts me. This occurred a few years ago, but it has been haunting me intermittently ever since. I feel compelled to share it. There was a man I had seen flying a few times. We were not close. I was not his instructor, merely another pilot at the same airfield. However, I recognized him and his aircraft. His aircraft had been grounded for about 5 weeks due to engine maintenance. This was his first flight back after all the work had been completed. For some reason, I could not shake a bad feeling about it. Call it gut instinct, paranoia, or whatever you like, something just felt amiss. I had this overwhelming sense that the engine would fail. Despite not being his instructor or even knowing him well, I approached him before his flight and discussed engine failure procedures with him. Specifically, I emphasized what to do if the engine failed during takeoff. If you lose power on takeoff, do not attempt to turn back. Keep it straight ahead or make a shallow turn only if you have the altitude. I must have repeated that point to him for at least 20 minutes. He was polite, nodded in agreement, and accurately repeated the procedures back to me. It seemed as though he absorbed what I was saying. By the time we finished, I felt assured that he understood the danger and was prepared for the worst-case scenario. However, there was still a nagging sense of dread. Deep down, something kept telling me it would not be sufficient. I went into the airport manager's office, trying to convince myself that he would be fine. Then I heard a frantic, terrified mayday call over the radio. His voice was cracking, raw with panic. I rushed outside, heart racing, to see what was happening. I witnessed his aircraft struggling immediately after takeoff. The engine had failed during the climb, precisely the scenario I had drilled him about. For those who are unfamiliar, if an aircraft's engine fails immediately after takeoff, the worst action to take is to try to turn back to the runway. The plane is flying low and slow, and turning sharply at that altitude caused the aircraft to lose lift. It would stall, meaning the wings stop generating enough lift to keep the plane airborne. If the stall occurs while turning, it often leads to a spin, causing the aircraft to spiral uncontrollably toward the ground. That is exactly what transpired. He panicked, attempted to turn back, and the plane stalled and spun, making a tight, horrifying corkscrew motion directly into the trees and ground. The sound it made was something I will never forget. It was a series of sickening, crunching thuds as the aircraft clipped the tops of trees, followed by a final, deeper crunch as it slammed into the ground. There was no explosion, no raging fire, just smoke and faint smoldering. I jumped into the airport pickup truck with my ramp friend, and we drove to the crash site, desperately hoping he was alive. As I approached the wreckage, everything was twisted metal and broken trees. I was navigating through the brush, rushing toward the remains of the aircraft, hoping there was something I could do to assist him. Suddenly, a doctor who had arrived moments before me called out, "Hey, you are stepping on his humerus." Yes, there are many doctors who frequent airports. I looked down. Sure enough, I was standing on a fractured piece of his body, part of his humerus, not the whole thing. However, the horror of what he said did not fully register at that moment. I looked up, and that is when I saw his body. It was mostly intact but horribly compressed, as though the impact had crushed him inward. His skin was torn and bloodied, sunken in, yet some parts of him were still recognizable. That is when the realization hit me hard. The shock, the horror, the guilt. I felt dizzy and staggered away from the wreckage, barely making it a few steps before violently vomiting. My legs buckled, and I had to sit down further from the crash site, shaking uncontrollably. Everything felt surreal. I had this twisted premonition about the engine failing, tried desperately to avert disaster, and then watched it unfold anyway. And then I found myself literally standing on a piece of him. I kept replaying that day repeatedly in my mind. I was not his instructor. I barely knew him, but something compelled me to warn him, and when he disregarded it, I felt as though I had failed him. Summary. A few years ago, a pilot I barely knew was about to fly for the first time after his aircraft spent 5 weeks undergoing maintenance for engine work. I had a premonition that the engine would fail, so I drilled him on what to do if it did. Minutes later, I heard his terrified mayday call, ran outside, and watched him experience an engine failure, panic, and crash. At the crash site, a doctor informed me that I was standing on part of his humerus. I vomited violently. The experience still haunts me. Addendum for those who believe this is not a true story. Read this carefully. We often say in aviation that one should treat other pilots with respect because you never know if it will be the last time you see them. There is a reason for that. If you live, work, and breathe aviation long enough, you are destined to witness at least one catastrophic event. I have witnessed 3. However, this was the only time I actually saw a dead body. Airports have something called an emergency response plan. It designates individuals to various roles when there is an accident on the field. That day, I was not part of the emergency response plan, but the individual I was with after speaking to the pilot was. He worked on the ramp. I wanted to accompany him and assist, mainly because I was present and felt I could be of help. I did not realize it would be so gruesome. I had no idea what I was walking into. I simply wanted to help. And here is the reality. When people think of airplane crashes, they envision a Boeing 747 crashing to the ground. However, general aviation is different. The crash rate is significantly higher, as is the fatality rate compared to commercial aviation. The risks are real, constant, and sometimes frighteningly imminent. Many people reading this are likely dismissing it as fiction because it seems too extreme. However, life is not neat. It does not adhere to some internet-approved pattern of plausibility. The most outrageous, gut-wrenching events are often the most real. Like the student of mine who was also a skydiver. Based on how he flew and how he conducted himself after obtaining his license, I just knew. I sensed in my gut that he would eventually die in an aircraft or during a skydiving jump. He exhibited this reckless invincibility complex. I sat him down multiple times, attempting to instill the importance of recognizing hazardous attitudes in aviation. I provided him with literature on human factors. He acted as though he understood, but I could tell he did not truly grasp it. I even told a few friends directly that he would eventually perish due to some reckless act. 3 months later, on my birthday, I received a text from one of those friends that read something like, "You called it, XY died skydiving." That is what real human tragedy looks like. It is not some perfectly scripted narrative where individuals perish from cancer or old age in a neat, linear fashion. It is brutal, unfair, and often absurd, and it occurs frequently in aviation. Another time, while I was serving as a flight training unit dispatcher, I received a phone call from someone who was clearly distressed. They pleaded with me to check if their relative's aircraft was parked at our airport. I did not see it. When I inquired about the type of airplane and they mentioned a Cessna 150, I immediately felt goosebumps ripple down my spine. I had already read the news that morning. A Cessna 150 had crashed in a large state park overnight. I provided them with the contact information for the Flight Information Center and ended the call, then informed my supervisor. It turned out that the caller's nephew was the one who crashed and perished alongside his friend. Aviation is unforgiving. It is not some sanitized, meticulously controlled environment. Things go wrong, and they happen frequently. Just because my experiences may sound extreme does not mean they are not real. The most outrageous events, they are often the ones most likely to be true. Story 4. Fell for my straight best friend, Sunshine, and it shattered my heart. She called me wifey but ran back to guys. After months of mixed signals, I heard, "I can't stop falling for you," but she still said goodbye, leaving me shattered. Can I really move on now? I am a 16-year-old female. This situation has been ongoing for about 2 years, and it has recently reached an unsatisfying conclusion, but I felt compelled to share it. I suppose I will start from the beginning. In October of 2023, one of my friends, whom I will refer to as Sunshine, invited me to go trick-or-treating with her. To be fair, I had not participated in this activity due to some friendship trauma that occurred on that holiday, which somewhat ruined it for me, but I decided to go anyway. Everything seemed fine initially, but I soon realized that things were changing. She held my hand, believing it felt cold, and when we returned to my room, we cuddled while watching television. I recognize that many close heterosexual friendships, particularly among female friends, may involve this type of intimacy. Perhaps it was my fault for perceiving and feeling something more, but my 14-year-old heart could not help itself and ended up developing feelings for her. As the months passed, I berated myself for falling for a friend, a heterosexual Catholic friend at that. Yet she began to subtly flirt with me, using affectionate nicknames like Honey and the most striking of all, Wifey, which made my heart flutter every time. She also occasionally hinted at a disinterest in boys. By January of 2024, the tension escalated. We both attended an event hosted by an organization we were both a part of, and while cleaning up, she jokingly remarked, "Guess what? You are gay." I assumed it was a random statement, so I laughed, confused, and replied, "Wow, you do not say." When we went upstairs to put items in cars and returned inside, she said, "Guess what? I am gay too." My heart soared. However, if this was her coming out to me, I did not want to overshadow her moment with my feelings. Instead, I asked her if she meant it seriously, and when she nodded, I hugged her and said, "I am so proud of you." When I inquired about her experience of coming to terms with her sexuality, she panicked and said something along the lines of, "Oh, that is not important." I kept playfully teasing her about it until I realized that I was her homosexual awakening. After a week filled with anxiety and seeking advice from my brother on what to do, I decided to address her feelings again as we needed to discuss it. When I asked her if I was her awakening, she confirmed it and added, "What are you going to do about it?" with a smirk. I told her I knew precisely what I wanted to do, but also recognized that this was all new for her, and she likely needed time to navigate her feelings without rushing into anything. Weeks passed, and eventually she called me to suggest hanging out. So we did have a study session at my house with the door open. While not typical first date material, we made the best of it. We spent the first half studying and doing homework, and then somehow, and I wish I could explain exactly how, but at this point it is a blur, we ended up cuddling once more. I will spare you the details and simply say we were both very content, and when she had to leave, we felt sad to part ways. I walked her to the door, hugged her, and that was that. I felt good for the next few days, but soon noticed she was not responding to my texts as often. 2 days after our date, she sent me a message stating she enjoyed our time together but was not ready for a relationship and needed time. I was hurt, but I understood. A month later, with no communication, she called me unexpectedly, saying she did not believe it would ever work out between us. I smiled and replied that it was okay. However, as soon as the call ended, I broke down. This was my first real heartbreak, and it struck hard. I spent a month engulfed in sadness and feeling inadequate for her. When May arrived, it was time for room assignments for the summer camp where I was working, the one she initially encouraged me to join. Seeing her name next to mine made my heart drop, but not precisely with relief. I would be spending the summer with her in a small cabin, talk about the "and they were roommates" trope. Regardless, she seemed genuinely excited and wanted to go shopping for decorations. So we did, ultimately killing time at a bookstore where she discovered a poetry book she had been searching for. I watched as she read it, a bright smile lighting up her face perfectly, and I remembered when I could bring her that joy and how I could not anymore. When she attempted to return the book because her parents would be furious if she bought it, I took the book, flipped through a few pages, and ran to the cashier to purchase it. I told her to hide it under her bed if her parents became suspicious. I know, very cliché. That was the moment I realized I was in trouble. That was when I knew I was in love with her. The summer itself was chaotic, and honestly, too many events transpired for me to capture them all here. A short summary would be this: I recognized a pattern she had. Every time she became close and affectionate with me, she would retreat and develop a crush on a random guy for a couple of weeks, subsequently distracting herself from me. This cycle continued all summer and into the following fall. However, this time she had a boyfriend. In November, I learned from a mutual friend that she was dating someone. I was not surprised, as I had come to understand her pattern and knew she would soon move on, but I had no intention of pursuing her at that time. When she texted me to say she had broken up with her boyfriend, I offered my support, stated that I was there if she needed to talk, and thought that would be the end of it. Or so I believed. She then began texting me frequently, expressing feelings of loneliness or a desire to talk. I complied, as I had stated I would. I assumed this was part of her cycle, where she would become close to me again before dropping me at the sight of a heterosexual man 2 years her senior. But then we started calling each other more often, discussing everything and nothing. I realized this was not part of her usual pattern. By February of this year, our mutual friend talked to her about our situation, and she sunshine confessed that she could not stop falling for me, expressing fear of losing me if things did not work out, and that she was also scared to acknowledge her feelings in the first place. Then last March, she called me, essentially offering an apology. She acknowledged leading me on and not realizing it, being unable to love me back due to her upbringing and hurting me. I told her it was alright since she finally recognized it and understood her mistakes. She explained that she flirted with me because she could not recall a time when we were not acting that way, which ouch. The conversation mainly provided me with the closure I needed to finally feel liberated and ready to begin moving on. During this time in March of this year, my friends encouraged me to speak with another girl. I did, and she seems quite nice. I am hesitant to start anything since I am still hurting, but at the same time, I do not want to keep her waiting or, even worse, lead her on accidentally. I am unsure if I am genuinely attached to her or if I am merely trying to convince myself to see her differently so that I find her appealing. I apologize for submitting such a lengthy post. I do not typically post on here. I thought that by finally writing it all out, it might assist me in processing it. I am not really seeking advice unless you have some for the new girl I am trying to figure things out with. I hope you all have a good day.